Thaddeus Kane knelt on the marble floor, polishing shoes that cost more than his monthly rent. The boardroom doors burst open. 12 executives filed in, laughing at something on a phone screen. "Still playing Butler at your age?" sneered Bramwell Ashcroft, the board's newest member. Thaddeus said nothing. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small golden key. The room went silent. "Where did you get that?" Ashcroft's voice cracked. The key bore the Kingsley family crest, the same crest hanging above the CEO's empty chair. Thaddeus stood slowly, brushing dust from his knees. "I think it's time," he said. "You all remembered whose house this really is." Bramwell Ashcroft laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "A key doesn't mean anything," he said. "Anyone can buy a trinket like that at an estate sale." Thaddeus placed the key on the boardroom table. It landed with a metallic click that silenced the room again. "This key opens the vault beneath the east wing," Thaddeus said, "the one your architects couldn't find during renovations." A woman near the back shifted in her seat. Her nameplate read, "Odalise Ferris, head of legal." "There is no vault," she said carefully. "I reviewed the blueprints myself." "You reviewed the blueprints Harlan Kingsley wanted you to find," Thaddeus said. The mention of the old man's name changed the air in the room. Harlan Kingsley had built this company from a single hardware store into an empire spanning 14 states. He died 8 months ago. The board had spent every day since fighting over his shares. Bramwell stood up, buttoning his jacket. Harlan Kingsley was a sick old man in his final years. Whatever promises he made to the help don't hold up in court. "The help," Thaddeus repeated the words slowly, like he was tasting something bitter. "Is that what you called him? To his face?" Bramwell's jaw tightened. Odalise leaned forward. "Mr. Kane, if you're suggesting you have some claim to this company, I'd advise you to speak with counsel before you say another word." "I don't need counsel," Thaddeus said. "I need 5 minutes and this key." He walked toward the panel behind the CEO's chair, the one everyone assumed was decorative. Bramwell stepped in front of him. "Sit back down. You're an employee. You clean the floors and iron the shirts. That's the extent of your relationship with this family." "Is that what he told you?" Thaddeus asked. "Or is that just easier to believe?" Something flickered across Bramwell's face. Doubt. He'd married into proximity to the Kingsley fortune 3 years ago, when he wed Harlan's estranged niece, Verlene. He'd spent every year since trying to prove he belonged in that boardroom. He couldn't afford doubt right now, not with the merger vote 2 days away. "Security," Bramwell said, not taking his eyes off Thaddeus. "Please escort Mr. Kane out of the building." 2 men in dark suits entered from the side door. Thaddeus didn't move. "Before I go," he said, "someone should probably explain why Harlan Kingsley changed his will 4 times in his final year, and why every version named the same person as executor." Odalise's pen stopped moving. "That's not possible," she said. "I filed the final will myself. It named the board as collective executor." "You filed the will your law firm was given," Thaddeus said, "not the one Harlan actually signed." Bramwell's composure cracked for the first time. "Are you accusing Ashcroft and Whitfield of forgery?" "I'm saying old men who spend their final months talking to their butler about regret say things they don't say to their lawyers." The security guards hesitated, glancing at Bramwell for confirmation. "He talked to me every night for 6 years," Thaddeus continued, "about his son he never reconciled with, about the family he built, and the family that built itself around his money instead." Verlene Ashcroft appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. She hadn't spoken to Thaddeus in months, not since the funeral, when she'd looked right through him like furniture. "Thaddeus," she said, "what is this?" "Ask your husband why he had the East Wing blueprints redrawn 6 weeks after your uncle's funeral," Thaddeus said. "Ask him what he was trying to erase." The room turned to Bramwell. For the first time since he'd walked in laughing, he had nothing to say. Thaddeus picked the golden key back up off the table. "I'll be in the East Wing," he said. "Anyone who wants the truth knows where to find me." He walked out past the security guards, who didn't dare touch him. The East Wing hadn't been opened in 8 months. Dust sheets covered the furniture like sleeping ghosts. Thaddeus walked straight to the fireplace, past the portrait of Harlan Kingsley as a young man, standing in front of his first hardware store. Bramwell Ashcroft arrived first, alone, his footsteps echoing. It ends today. You followed me, Thaddeus said, curious, for a man who called me the help. I followed you because whatever theater you're performing for the board, it stops now. Bramwell's voice had lost its boardroom polish. This company merges with Colton Industries in 2 days. 14,000 jobs depend on that vote going smoothly. Then you should want the truth more than anyone. Thaddeus knelt at the base of the fireplace and pressed his palm against a brick that looked identical to every other brick. It gave way. A section of the hearth slid backward, revealing a narrow stone staircase leading down. Bramwell's face went pale. That's not in any blueprint. I know, Thaddeus said. I helped him build it, 6 years ago, back when you were still trying to get invited to Verline's family dinners. He descended. Bramwell followed, muttering something about lawyers and injunctions, but his feet kept moving. The vault below was small, a single room, climate-controlled, holding a safe, a filing cabinet, and a leather chair where Harlan Kingsley used to sit and think. Thaddeus inserted the golden key into the safe. It clicked open. Inside sat a stack of documents, a small velvet box, and a sealed envelope with one word written across it. Verline. Footsteps thundered down the staircase behind them. Odalise Ferris arrived, followed closely by Verline herself, both breathless. Someone needs to explain what's happening, Odalise said. Right now. Thaddeus lifted the top document from the safe, a will, dated 4 months before Harlan's death, signed and notarized. This is the real will, Thaddeus said, not the one your firm filed. Odalise snatched it from his hands, scanning the signature line, the notary seal, the date. Her face drained of color. This notary, she said slowly. This isn't anyone from Ashcroft and Whitfield. No, Thaddeus said. Harlan didn't trust your firm by the end. He hired an independent notary. The same week he discovered his own attorney had been feeding information to Bramwell for over a year. Bramwell stepped back. That's a lie. Is it? Thaddeus pulled a second document from the safe. Bank records, wire transfers, dates lining up with board meetings where critical votes had been decided in Bramwell's favor. $15,000 a month, wired from your personal account to Harold Whitfield. Starting the month after your wedding. Verline turned to her husband, her voice barely above a whisper. You were paying my uncle's own attorney? I was protecting our future, Bramwell said. Everything I did was for us. You were buying yourself a board seat, Thaddeus said. And when that wasn't enough, you started rewriting blueprints to hide a vault you didn't even know existed, hoping no one would ask why. Odalise was still reading the will, her hands trembling slightly. This document names an executor. It's not the board. Read the name, Thaddeus said quietly. She read it. Her eyes lifted to Thaddeus, then back to the page, then back to Thaddeus again. It's you, she said. Harlan Kingsley named his butler as sole executor of his entire estate. The room went silent, except for the soft hum of the climate control system. Bramwell laughed, but it came out hollow and desperate. This is absurd. A butler doesn't inherit an empire. Courts will laugh this out of session. Read the second page, Thaddeus said. Odalise turned the page, and her breath caught. There's more, she said. A personal letter, attached as testimony of intent. Read it, Verline said. Please. Odalise cleared her throat and read aloud, her voice unsteady. The letter explained, in Harlan's own words, why he'd made the choice he made. It described a man who had shown him more loyalty in 6 years than his own family had shown him in 60. It described long nights when illness kept him awake, and the only person who sat with him, listened to him, and asked for nothing in return was the man polishing his shoes every morning. By the time Odalise finished, Verline was crying. Uncle Harlan tried to tell me, she said. At Christmas, he said he wanted to talk about the future. I told him I didn't have time. I had a merger meeting. He tried to tell all of you, Thaddeus said. Every one of you was too busy fighting over what he had to notice what he needed. Bramwell lunged for the will, snatching it from Odalise's hands. This means nothing without proper certification. I'll have my own experts examine that signature. I'll bury this in litigation for years. You can try, Thaddeus said calmly, but you might want to look at what's in the velvet box first. Bramwell hesitated, then opened it. Inside sat a small recording device, the kind used for dictation. A single label was affixed to the top. For Whitfield's replacement, in case Bramwell tries exactly what he's about to try. Thaddeus pressed play. Harlan Kingsley's voice filled the vault, weaker than in the portrait upstairs but unmistakably clear. He detailed in his own words the wire transfers to Whitfield, the pressure Bramwell had put on him during his illness to sign early transfer documents, and his decision, made with full mental clarity, he stated twice, to protect the company from a man who saw it only as a prize. By the end of the recording, Bramwell was sitting in Harlan's old leather chair, his face buried in his hands. Security arrived at the top of the staircase, summoned by Odalise the moment the recording started. Not for Thaddeus this time. 2 officers descended, informed of the wire fraud allegations and the tampering with legal documents that Odalise was already outlining through her phone to the district attorney's office. "You have the right to remain silent," one officer said, stepping toward Bramwell. Bramwell looked up at Thaddeus one final time. "The board will never accept a Butler as CEO." "I never asked to be CEO," Thaddeus said. "I asked to make sure Harlan's wishes were honored. What the board does after that is their business." The officers led Bramwell up the staircase. Verline didn't follow. She stood in the vault, staring at the letter still in her hands, seeing her uncle's handwriting for what felt like the first time in years. 3 months later, the boardroom looked different. Sunlight came through windows that had always been there, but no one had bothered opening the curtains in years. Thaddeus Kane sat at the head of the table, not because he'd asked for the seat, but because the board had voted him into it. Every member, except the one now awaiting trial for wire fraud and forgery. Bramwell Ashcroft's case had moved quickly once the recording was entered into evidence. Harold Whitfield, facing his own disbarment, had cooperated fully, confirming every payment, every altered document, every year of quiet betrayal. Verline had filed for divorce the week after the vault was opened. She hadn't spoken to Bramwell since. She sat 2 seats down from Thaddeus now, no longer the woman who looked through him like furniture. She ran the philanthropic arm of the company, a division Harlan had wanted expanded for years but never found the time to build. "The East Wing renovation is finished," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "We turned the vault room into a small museum. Uncle Harlan's story, from the hardware store to now." "He would have hated that," Thaddeus said, allowing himself a small smile. "Too much attention." "He would have hated it," Verline agreed, "and secretly loved every minute." Odalise Ferris, now general counsel, her predecessor quietly retired following the scandal, cleared her throat. "Before we move to quarterly reports," she said, "there's a matter of the executor's personal compensation. Mr. Kane has declined it for 3 consecutive months." The board looked at Thaddeus. "I don't need it," he said simply. "Harlan paid me well enough in 6 years of conversation. I'm not doing this for money." "Then what are you doing it for?" one of the newer board members asked, a young man named Corwin Vance, brought in after the restructuring. Thaddeus considered the question longer than anyone expected. "My father worked in a factory for 30 years, he finally said. He believed the people at the top never saw the people at the bottom. Not really, not as human beings." He looked around the table. "Harlan saw me. Every night, for 6 years, he asked about my day before he talked about his own. Not because he needed something from me, because he was curious." "That's it?" Corwin asked. "Curiosity built all this?" "Curiosity, and the willingness to actually listen to the answer," Thaddeus said. "You'd be surprised how rare that combination is in a room like this." The meeting continued. Quarterly numbers were strong. The merger with Colton Industries had fallen apart after news of the scandal broke. But 2 better offers had come in since, each promising to preserve jobs rather than consolidate them. After the meeting ended and the room emptied, Thaddeus stayed behind, as he often did, sitting in the quiet. He thought about the golden key, now displayed under glass in the Vault Museum downstairs, about the boardroom laughter that had greeted him that first day, and the silence that followed once they understood what he was holding. He didn't think about Bramwell much these days. There wasn't room for that kind of bitterness in a life he was still learning how to live. Instead, he thought about Harlan, and the nights they'd spent talking about nothing important, which had somehow turned out to be the most important thing of all. A knock came at the door. Verline stood there, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Same as always?" she asked, holding one out to him. Same as always, Thaddeus said, taking the cup. She sat down across from him, in the chair her uncle used to occupy. Tell me about him, she said, the parts I missed. Thaddeus smiled and began to talk.